I normally have a backup. I don't have it with me today. Kat, that would be great if you could.
Tu tawa mai I runga, tu tawa mai I raro, tu tawa mai I roto, tu tawa mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māori, tu te Māori ora. Ki katoa, haumie, huie, tā kie.
Thank you very much. We have no apologies from the committee. We have no public forum. The late item has been withdrawn. I do apologise that you got dumped with a 570-page business case. Yes, there's no confidential business transferred into open, and I'm not aware of any change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of December. Is there any changes, any?
Correct.
Thank you, Andrew, and seconded by Stephen. Thank you. True and correct record. All those in favour say aye. Gets carried. And then we have the minutes of the workshop held on the notes from the workshop held on the 28th of February. Any comments on those? Any concerns? Any changes? No. Thank you, Andrew, and Stephen second. True and correct record. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? No, that brings us to the item on 15th Ave to Welcome Bay, and we've got a presentation on that. Helena.
Morning, Chair.
Like to introduce yourselves. I'm not sure that you've appeared here before, have you?
Yeah, Jason Spencer, Program Manager for Major Projects.
Derek McFadden, I'm the Project Manager for 15th of Bay Single Stage Business Case.
Colin Harskin, Principal Transport Planner, Tauranga City Council.
Okay, we're in your hands.
The Chair, we have a presentation which has been emailed. I don't know whether that's available for projection or whether I should just talk to the.
Has everyone got a copy of it? I've got a copy of it. No. Are we able to get it up?
Email it through to us.
Can you email it through? Sorry, I didn't realise it hadn't been sent through.
Jasmine's going to send it through.
Excuse me, that'll just be emailed through now. But for the purposes of time, shall I make a start? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Committee, for the time to talk about this project today. What we're I guess, seeking from the committee is just acknowledgement of where we're at with the project as we give the update and hopefully support for the project as it goes through the approval steps. So my first slide, when that comes up, will show the approvals pathway that we have for the project. We've cleared a couple of hurdles to date. The first being the TSP PMG meeting, which was held on the 12th of April, and secondly, the 17th of April TSP governance group meeting. So both were in support of the project. However, at the TSP governance group meeting, there was discussion about the new draft GPS requirements. And here we got the project, the slides in front of us. So if we can go to the next slide, please, which is the approvals pathway to it. Yes, there was discussion at the governance group meeting about the draft GPS guidelines and the impact that that might have on the project. So the project team was tasked with going away and looking at the economic benefits of the project if it was delivered in two stages. Stage one being the first stage from Cameron Road down through to the Haureni underpass, and stage two being the 29A underpass, Haureni underpass through to the end of the project out at round about Ranganui Road on Welcome Bay. So we looked at that and presented those benefit cost ratios to the commissioners. There was a meeting with the commissioners on last Monday, 22nd it was, and a decision was made at that meeting to present the project in two stages. Stage one being the from Cameron Road through to the 29A, which had the benefits were predominantly weighted towards travel benefits, travel time benefits, and stage two being the balance of the project where the benefits were predominantly weighted towards the walking and cycling benefits. So it was decided to present the business case in two stages, with just that stage one being asked for endorsement by Waka Kotahi and funding by Waka Kotahi. So that was a big change that was made at that point in time. So that brings us to the 20th of May council meeting. We will be asking for approval for the project. And at this stage, when we talk about approval for the project, we'll be asking for the council, recommending to the council that it approves the implementation of stage one of the project, with stage two of the project being subject to subsequent approvals. So at the same stage, at that point in time, we are going a little bit early in the phase in terms of a business case. We haven't quite completed the business case, fully completed the business case as yet. We've completed the executive summary. So at that point in time, we'll be asking for a delegation of authority to the commissioners to delegate authority to the CE to approve the business case, full business case, once that's completed, to be submitted to Waka Kotahi. At the same meeting, we'll be presenting an update on the work we're doing on the Haureni Bridge and Causeway in terms of seismic strengthening and resilience. We believe there is a case, an economic case to strengthen that bridge. We are not quite convinced at this stage that we'll be at the point on 20th of May of having that fully validated and funded and costed. So we are suspecting that we will be giving an update and possibly asking for delegated authority from the council to implement that later on, subject to those further validation and funding matters being resolved. Subsequent to that, obviously, in terms of the approvals process, we're looking for this to go to Waka Kotahi. Indications previously were that we would be targeting the Waka Kotahi board in October, which I think is the 24th of October. But that date hasn't been confirmed as yet. Maybe if there's any questions, is that appropriate before I move on to the next slide? Or?
Yeah, just I am keen just to emphasise the tricky situation we are in now with the GPS and sort of emphasise what lies behind the decision making at quite a late stage, change parts of the direction of the project and dividing it into two. And basically, what we're looking at here is sort of a shift in ideology, what the government policy statement does and doesn't support. And I think with regards to this project, we're in a position where if we're stuck with the original plan and the original business case, we would be up for getting nothing. So we're trying to adjust the business case and into stages where an early stage would actually mean that we get something out of the out of the original business case rather than walk away with nothing. So we're making an adjustment in order to make as much improvement to the network as we can, without being too greedy and trying to bite off the whole piece and get nothing. So we have done that, had conversations with NCTA and Waka Kotahi, who have been very helpful in regards of what their interpretation or early interpretation are in terms of the GPS, because they then turn the GPS into a funding assessment manual that ultimately underlines the projects that do get funded and don't. So it's early days for everyone, and it is a bit of guesswork. And I guess I'm just wanting to underline the fact that it's a change that it's a change that is based on a bit of a gamble here, but we think we have it on good authority that this is our chance actually to make some swift improvements to the network rather than getting nothing.
The explanation from the Commission is that it was put very clearly to the GPS has changed the landscape, and that's why I raised funding, because and this is going to be happening more and more. So where the Commission was, we want to get the tidal flow, we want to get that project, the main elements of that project across the line. It's one of our key congestion points in the city, and we're very keen for that work to start work in July of next year. What was putting it at risk was the 3 kilometres of walking and cycling that was at the second part of that. So what the Commission said was, let's get the funding for the important transport, and this relates to the conversations we've just been having. There may be other ways that we can fund still. We're not walking away from that walking and cycling, that mode shift to make walking and cycling safe. But there may be other ways to fund that other than through the GPS funding or the NZTA funding now. That then becomes a community project, that if that's important to our community, we seek to fund that in different ways. And that's what I was trying to say earlier on, that we're driven by funding mechanisms for what we can do. And a lot of our structure and our planning is driven by that funding. That doesn't mean that we walk away from that UFTI, connected centres, spatial planning and desire for the best city, which includes that mode shift. So, yeah, that's the thinking at this stage, and that's difficult for the transport people to think differently, but that's part of that urban growth. No. Yeah, you can ask a question.
It'll be quick. Could it risk a phase where it's actually no longer viable for cyclists and pedestrians because of the expanded road? Let's say this is funded another way, but there's a lag. So you've got the initial Waka Kotahi stage 1, but because it's a bigger roading scenario, could it risk actually severing off completely pedestrians and cyclists?
I don't believe it would. I mean, as Commissioner Tollins just said, it is a commitment that we still want to have with the stakeholders and Hapu, Manawhanua, etc. We still want to be able to do that, but to de-risk the actual project for zones 1 and 2 and into 3 for stage 1 to get that across the line, we've had to take that walking and cycling area out, as well as the raised tables as well that also form part of that area, down from Cameron Road down 15th. But the commitment is still there that we want to do that, although that we've had discussions in the last day with those local stakeholders and just inform them that this is the way that the project is now going. That's where we've got to with that. But we need to give it the best shot we can to get it through.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you for that explanation, which I think is really, really important for all of us going forward, particularly through LTPs. And I'm just wondering, presumably the TSP governance group has been advised of how this will impact all of your proposed roading multimodal projects. I wonder, have we been advised of that? Because that to me is a critical piece of information for not only regional land transport planning, but for smart growth as well. So I'm just saying, if TSP have received that information, could we have it as well?
Yes.
Yes, it did come through the TSP group, and that's where that information then came through to ourselves. But that was the rocking point that really was part of the discussions that went from TSP all the way through.
Look, I'm not talking just specifically 15th Ave. I'm talking all of the investment programs and projects that are likely to be impacted by this GPS change direction. Can we get that information so that we're... Yes, please.
Yes, and although that we're only talking about one particular project at the moment,
That's
we are looking at all of them as well, including LCLR.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a note of caution is that all projects who change their scope have to go through their project governance processes. It's not real until it's decided that the organisations who control of it are comfortable with the outcome. And I think, once it's through a governance process, then it becomes something that would be legitimately and usefully entered into the RLTP process potentially, and TSP can definitely manage that as a process. But I guess as the team works through each of those individual projects, that's when it becomes real. So it may not come all at once, I guess is what I'm saying. But as a general note to the deliberations process, we can intimate what we think is going to happen. But the projects themselves will confirm their scopes as it gets through its governance.
Yeah, look, I totally understand that, but I think it's, again, we were talking communication in our workshop. So here's a good example. And a question I have, you have 5 significant transformational projects on the go, and I understand there are governance arrangements for those. So how do those governance arrangements link with TSP?
So the oversight group that has been formed between NZTA and TCC is for project delivery. So we're still at the planning and funding stage. So my understanding of the oversight group is focused on the delivery aspect of that, which is the practical case. Yeah. So each of the planning ones goes through the TSP, but I take your point that I think from the Commissioner's point of view, we've got a pretty good understanding of what's changed, but you need to talk to your people.
Chair, if I may, and from a regional transport perspective, I don't think we would see any change in the priority of the projects. The projects themselves might change shape a little bit, this is a classic example of it, but 15th turret is still kind of right up there in terms of I think it's our number 3 or 4, in terms of our priorities for investment. It's the flavour of that investment that changes.
Certainly having to pivot and look very closely, and that then puts pressure on the long-term plan, because we are still looking to achieve, safe mode shift, which we know is critical to relieve congestion. So, okay, keep going. We're only on slide 1.
Oh, right. Well, shall I speed up? Next slide, please.
Well, that was quite critical to explain the change.
Yep. This slide sort of covers a similar same ground, really, so we won't go into it in a lot of detail, but just gives the scope of stages 1 and 2. I'll talk a little bit about in other slides, so we don't need to go into that in any detail. Timing, in terms of the change, in timing, dividing up into stage 1 and stage 2 is really no different to what we were planning anyway. We're always going to be doing stages, the Welcome Bay stages, zones 3 and 4, towards the later end of the project. So we're still targeting commencement for stage 1, middle 2026, go through to late, 25, go through to late 2026, when we start up on zones stage 2, which will be zones 3 and 4, and that'll go through to early 2028. So delivery, obviously, the stage 1 will be under the major projects program, and the stage 2 will now go to the low cost, low risk program. And so just to be clear, in terms of the business case that we'll be presenting to Waka in October, we'll only be asking for funding for stage 1, not for stage 2. So obviously we're looking for the standard funding arrangements with Waka on stage 1. At the moment, clearly, because of the quick pivot we've had to do on this, we can't really be crystal clear at all on how funding for stage 2 might develop. Obviously, we've had some discussions with Wakute about fundability under low cost, low risk, and there's obviously some issues there. So we just need to be aware of those things. Let's go to the next slide. And this shows, and in the figure on the right-hand side, that was the entire project before we started dividing up into stage 1 and stage 2. So, and the listings on the left-hand side, with a few corrections I'm going to make now, are effectively what we're putting into stage 1. So, and I probably go through this quite quickly because most people will be quite familiar with this. We're 4-laning of 15th Avenue with a general traffic lane and a curbside T2 lane, PT lane. A new signalised pedestrian crossing at Devonport Road. We have confirmed now that we will, as a response to the Safe Systems audit, have a traffic signal at Grace Road. We will be taking out the raised tables on the side roads. We have a shared use path all the way from Fraser on the left of the corridor, on the west, as you see there, from Fraser all the way through to Towett Road Bridge. And a similar short length of shared path on the opposite side of the road between Fraser and Burrows, and a solid medium, raised medium between Cameron and Fraser for safety reasons. The local road improvements that it's a bit hard to see on that, but most of those will go to stage 2, or those are a short section on Burrows Street that we will implement in stage 1. Next slide, please. Okay, so stage 2, which is the Haureni Bridge and Causeway. So everything that we proposed through there in the total project will go into stage 2. So in short, that is converting the current 2-lane bridge to a 3-lane bridge. So we've got a tidal flow option through there, and taking the existing shared use path that's on the western side of that bridge and using a clip-on structure to create a much wider, safer shared use path on the western side of the structure. So that does require relocation of nesting terns that nest on the historic bridge piers. So that's something that we have started work on at the moment as part of our early pre-implementation works program. And that does represent a fairly significant risk to the project in terms of overall consenting and timeline. There's a signalised, not shown on here, but on the previous plan, there was a signalised pedestrian crossing on Towett Road, somewhere along Towett Road between the bend into 15th Avenue and the Causeway to provide better pedestrian access from the residential areas to the Pahutakawas and Reserve and the waterside on the eastern side of Towett Road. And there's a new traffic signal at the Holiday Park, just at the north of the bridge abutment, to enable people that are to U-turn there and then coming south, needing to enter properties along Towett Road, unable to do so because they've got 2 lanes of traffic potentially in the morning peak coming towards them. So a U-turn there to enable them to U-turn and then turn back north and do a left into their properties. And that U-turn, obviously, that traffic signal also enables access to the holiday park. On the slide, you'll see the proposed new water main. So that's just really flagging up now that part of the project now is to integrate city water scope into the project. So that's one of the big efforts that we're doing at the moment in terms of the pre-implementation. We identified this particular aspect quite early in the piece in liaison with the Waters program. So all the work we've done on feasibility of the bridge in terms of conversion to 3 lanes with the clip-on structure has taken account of the loading of that new water main. I think if we can go on to the next slide, unless there are any questions at this stage. Okay, so here we're looking at stage 2 predominantly, which is zones 3 to 4. Essentially, the only part of this which we'll be doing in stage 1 is the traffic signals at James Cook Drive and intersection of James Cook Drive and Welcome Bay Road, and the small mini roundabout at James Cook Drive and Victory Street. All the other interventions will be at stage 2, and again, the raised tables you'll see there, proposing to go. We have just moving from left to right in terms of that image. We have a pedestrianised crossing just to the west of Kaitiamako Road. We have shared use path pretty much all the way along the marine side, if you like, side of Welcome Bay Road, right through to close to the end of the project, Ranganui Road area. There's a roundabout at Waitaha Road, which is currently being implemented, if it's not already completed, under the low cost, low risk program. Just showing that on here for completeness. There were some safety interventions around schools in terms of crossings, which were identified, and then a safety intervention up at the pedestrianised crossing to the right of that image for children and parents accessing the walled-off school in that area. And a boardwalk between, the shared use path is proposed to be a boardwalk between James Cook Drive and Waitaha Road to avoid widening the footpath in that area, which would impact some Pahuta colours in that area. So, okay, so to the numbers. The project numbers we see there are all up numbers for the project, stage 1, stage 2. They also include the pavement rehabilitation costs, which we will not be asking for Waka Kotahi for. That's not fundable under Waka Kotahi's, the arrangements with Waka Kotahi. But in terms of the overall project and what we'll be delivering, it'll definitely be those numbers, plus the costs obviously associated with Waters, as we define those costs and the bridge strengthening if that is decided to proceed with. Project economics, overall project economics sitting at 2.9. And then when we break that out by stages, stage 1 still sitting at 2.9, stage 2 at 3. So you can see there that in terms of stage 1, very high benefits for travel time, vehicle operating costs, 58% and 8% respectively, and some reasonable benefits for walking and cycling because we still have shared use paths in stage 1. And stage 3, the benefits are predominantly with the safety and walking and cycling. Questions? Oh. Go on to timeline. Sorry, that's far too much information. I know it's very hard to read. So essentially what we've talked about before, we're aiming for a start for the project in mid-2025. At that stage, we should have the habitat for the nesting terns, the alternative habitats for the nesting terns relocated. Works proper start a little bit later in terms of the bridge in zones 1 and zone 1 works. That'll be complete around about late 2026, and when we'll be getting into zones 3 and 4, completing early 2028.
Any questions? No. So we're looking to receive the report and I guess. Thank you. Support the report and note that that's going through to council on the 20th of May. You second it? Any further discussion? No. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. That brings us to, that brings us to our update report. Who's going first?
Yeah, I can take that. Commissioner.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Didn't recognise the voice. Sorry.
No, you're all good. Just as usual, happy to take the report as read, and staff are happy to answer any questions you have on the projects. Thanks.
Anything in there? Nothing? Okay. Bad plenty?
Madam Chair, the only comment on page 34, item 3, phase 2 refresh for the Tauranga bus network. I have been talking with our staff while it's been paused. They have given me an assurance that it is still planned for sort of December this year. I don't want to see, I know we had to, because of funding and the bus operator, but we have a contract that goes to 2027 and we cannot wait till 2027 to actually do a refresh and improve our services. There's some of our services that are working exceptionally well and some that are not working to optimum at this stage. And I've asked our staff and had assurance from them that they will continue with that process. So while saying it's paused, it's only partially paused is my understanding. And they will go through to hoping to get a report back to us before Christmas. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a couple of issues and probably a segue from Andrew's comments. At your meeting this week, you had a report, I believe, on the arterial, but it did include state highway, congestion and usage, which I thought was extremely interesting and useful. And I just wanted to make sure that we are joined up in terms of the use of that information, some of which was very surprising in terms of the network refreshes and ongoing review of that. So just wanted to say bouquet, great report, interesting report, but it is pretty joined up, I hope.
Yes, we're definitely using that information as a basis.
Question. Yeah.
It is, as you say, incredibly useful information. So we will definitely be using it.
Great. The second thing is the decision you had to make on this CBD interchange, which clearly, I think in your own words, was regrettably suboptimal. Given the huge investment you're making in the CBD, and the real importance of, I guess, an interchange per se, is there hope on the horizon that at some stage this can be looked at again? I mean, I know you've got to do what you've got to do, but going forward, is there any hope, glimmer of hope, for an actual interchange? Maybe off-site, off-road.
Is just prohibitive. And the other difficulty is we've learned that where you actually create those spaces, and Willow Street was probably a good example, we create social issues of people hanging around. We give people reasons to hang around. It doesn't seem to happen in other cities. But I did make the comment at the meeting that within within 8 years, you'll have a different bus, a public transport model. The CBD will be complete. The major rebuilding will be complete, hopefully. And the patronage of public transport will have changed dramatically. I think that is a good opportunity then to have a look at what is needed and where. Because we do own land in the city and parking, and so there may well be opportunities for that. But we're still going to have narrow streets in the CBD, and we're still going to have quite a restricted CBD. So I don't think that door's closed, but just at the moment, there just doesn't appear to be anywhere sensible, and we have to design it in such a way, which I think, from looking at some of the other big cities, is a lot to do with the quantity of people using it. The more people using PT, the more they manage those social interactions, because it's just so busy. There isn't time for people to be hanging around and doing crazy things. So I don't think I made the comment at the meeting that I think we will come back in 8 or 9 years and have a look at how that's all working. Well, there just isn't the money in the long-term plan at the moment. So in the 10-year plan, the answer is no. In 3 years' time, that's an opportunity to relook.
And I think it will be an evolution, as Anne's described. I remember the discussion in Auckland around Britomart and having a dedicated bus interchange, and they ended up wrapping the buses in the block around Britomart, and it actually functions reasonably well. So, you know, the beauty of the flexibility of the bus system's ability to move to match demand is actually a benefit as well. So if you're stuck to a fixed location, you can lock yourself into a transport system does work. So there's trade-offs from a public transport point of view. And I think actually learning as the system evolves, then patronage drives then where the right investment should be. Yeah, it's not closed, but I think evolution over time will prove whether or not it's what the right solution will be.
Just moving on to item 4 on that page 34, which was the on-demand buses. I just want to report to this committee that early indications are really positive for that service. I looked yesterday, last night, at the patronage so far for April, and we were on the last day then, so it was pretty much there. 511 people had taken that service, and the service that it replaced effectively was Route 51, which in the month of March carried, but under 200 people on a big bus. And so 511, I think, is a great start. We will, we will look to bring back through our staff costings on, once we set up and running and how it's operating. So I haven't got those figures for you at this stage, but the feedback from the community is really positive. And hopefully it's a way forward for some of our less used routes, like maybe Matua, whatever. Who knows where we could go next, but it's too early to predict that. We've got an 18-month trial in place with this at the moment, but congratulations to our staff who have worked pretty hard to get that up and running in a reasonably short time. It is expensive, but it is working. So that's my update on that.
The one thing I didn't see in here was any reference in either of these next 2 reports to the ferry service, and I know there's a proposal came through. What's happening with that? Is there anything in the
So,
regional council?
Commissioner, I can talk to that. So
Oh.
the action from the last meeting here was that Bay of Plenty Regional Council staff would go and have a high-level assessment, look at those numbers, and then come back and report to that. So I can give you a brief update if you would like on that.
I think we would, because I mean, certainly there've been talk with the commissioners, and I know there's a proposal that came through, a formal proposal that's come through.
So we received the proposal on Friday. And we've just been working over, so two things. It's very similar to the proposal you've already seen, with some more beefed up figures and numbers and so on and so forth. And I think Matt will support here around, we wanted to get a second quote, I think is just the minimum, just to see whether the numbers that we were seeing were in kui. So just some reflections, and I think we'll bring this back as a proper paper with some options and considerations. But in terms of the assumptions around demand for passengers, we believe that they're optimistic. And I think as a project moving forward, the way that this type of proposal would move forward is to ignore that demand and treat that as a trial. And see what happens, because it's very difficult to actually assess demand, particularly for this type of ferry with cycling and whatnot. So there's integration issues. There's also operational issues around either end. All of that needs to be worked through and whatnot. But I think that the base cost ended up being around $2 million worth of OPEX and around $2 million worth of CAPEX that the proposal was moving forward. And I think we had a sort of a separate quote just to see what, if you went to market, what would it look like? And Matt, would you like to?
Yeah, I can run through it. So just a reminder, Hauraki Express came to us at the last meeting. Their numbers were, they indicated in 2024.
Just remembering we're an open.
Yep. Well, I'll just touch straight on the numbers anyway that I've worked through. At a high level, basically, it's going to cost $1 million to run an individual ferry service with 4 return trips from Omokoroa to Tauranga. So that's 8 individual trips a day. To get the numbers, so 384, which was noted previously, passenger trips per day at 50% occupancy of those vehicles, you'd need the equivalent of 32 individual trips per day or 4 boats to run that. So that the actual cost to run that would be, say, $4 million. And actually after any fares that you could make from that at 50% occupancy, it would be around $3 million loss operating per year. So as Mike sort of alluded to before, it's extremely expensive, and that doesn't actually include those other costs either upfront that are associated with it. So it's very expensive, and the demand element as well is very challenging as well. We know previously through sort of the Wednesday challenge and stuff, it is tricky, and we've got a limited catchment of people actually in Omokoroa that can actually use the ferry services. So it's not to say there wouldn't be potentially support for ferries politically in the future. I just think it's possibly something that we're going to be challenged with the demand that we have.
Well, my understanding of the proposal is that it is the mount, the first 2-year trial is the mount to the CBD, and the figures are an agreement to underwrite an amount certainly less than that, and if it's greater than that, they would take the risk. Look, I think we can find lots of reasons why you wouldn't do this, but we either trial it, and we've got an offer on the table for a 2-year trial. From TCC's point of view, we think it's worth a go for 2 years, and we're prepared to find our share of the underwrite. But I think, but that would be dependent on the regional council also coming to the party. So I think the best thing is that Mike and Nick go away and take the proposal that's on the table, perhaps get some outside expertise. It depends on what's in your long-term plan, whether there is any money, but it's less than $1 million each, and come back to this next meeting that we're proposing, because if we're going to do this, we need to make a decision and get on with it. But all the discussions that we've had whether it's priority one, whether it's tourism, Bay of Plenty, have all said if we've got an opportunity for a sensible trial that isn't going to cost too much, we should do it. Because I tell you, when they start work on whatever happens in Hewlett's, Hull, Tortora, we're going to need as many options as possible to get people between the Mount and the city. And this could be a good option, but not if we're then starting it as a trial when that work starts. Well, that's where I am.
We're happy to take that as an action, absolutely. And we'll come back to this next committee with some options.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you for your work to date, but let's have a look at what's on the table, because I think we don't need a lot of infrastructure at either end. So it would be good to understand what CapEx we would be up for. And because the deal that I understand is on the table is only OPEX for us. And the operator would take the risk of the CapEx of the boats. Anyway, so you take that away and come back to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Anything else? Oh yes. How could I forget? I'm sorry. The other issue to raise is the Haireni Street bus lane. So when TCC met with at the Haireni Marae with our Tangata Whenua committee, it was requested that the bus lane be considered for tidal, what do you call it? Tidal flow, peak flow. So no one's able to use it at all, but actually it's normally used for buses at the peak time in the morning. Is it possible to change that so that the rest of the day people could use it?
Madam Chair, we have discussed that informally, and we didn't see any reason not to go with it. Turning it into just peak, I think it would keep our community, because there has been a lot of dissatisfaction with that, and I think it's a sensible solution from a BOPRC perspective.
Thanks for that. How do we process that?
If I may talk to that, it's obviously been on the radar with the 15th and Tarrant business case. It's not something that's included in the business case at the moment.
No, we heard that at the Marae.
Right, yes. However, well aware of the issues, and maybe it's a case of, the sort of the modelling hasn't been as granular as needed at the moment to make definitive decisions about that. So what we have done is we've been working with TCC's safety engineers to understand the issues that have arisen around that and why that has now been closed off to general traffic. And so we'll continue to do that. And what we've done is we've tasked our consultant who's doing the SSBC to write up in the business case a brief sections on the issues and options around that, paving a way for getting to the point where we can make a good decision during the pre-implementation stage in terms of whether that can be opened up or not. So, I mean, there are options potentially changing the T2 lane in that area where we have 2 lanes going northbound, changing that a little bit further north. So traffic coming down off the Haireni Road would be merging into 2 lanes of general traffic as to a managed lane with all issues of people moving lanes and so forth. So that may be a much safer option than just merging into a T2 lane. So, so we don't have an answer, I'm sorry, at this stage, but we are making sure that the work to try and close that out is being scoped in the business case and taken forward into the pre-implementation stage of the project.
So why can't we do both? Why can't we have an interim solution that allows out of peak hour traffic to join in, and then do, as you say, build the long-term solution into the business case when we've got 2 lanes of traffic and things change. But why can't we just have an interim solution where we say, yeah, let's get on with it? Because part of this is that public perception of public transport, and we're trying to make public transport just the general, generally accepted. When they see a lane that they can't use, considerable amount of residents, it's not just the marae, but all the people up there look down and see an empty lane that every now and then has a bus that they're not allowed to use.
Absolutely. So I see that as a task to take away here. So we'll have a conversation with the project team, but I think we can look into what the options are to do something there early, to maximise the real estate. That there's a social licence aspect, as you talk about, while we keep it operating safely. So we can leave a long-term solution in the program and the project business case, but actually we can deal with something a little bit swifter than that and see where we can go. So I'd say we could give an indication of that at that next meeting as well.
Okay. Do we need to receive that report?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Happy to move.
Andrew and Stephen, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. That's then the project's update report.
Yeah, so it's much the same as the prior document before, so happy to take that as read. Any questions on that, staff happy to answer. Cheers.
Just on the high-spec shelters on Cameron Road, when I was in Tokyo recently, I saw bus shelters much along the lines, I think, that we're talking in Durham Street, which were just roofs, but they were painted. They just had the stripes, because obviously in a big city like Tokyo, they have several different types organisations running public transport services, but they just had these colourful stripes along. They were purple and green and yellow and almost rainbow. But then that was matched on the bus, and I thought, and it was really eye-catching. I mean, there's some simple things we can do surely without spending a lot of money.
So we have actually talked about that a little bit more as a team, and the result that we ended up with was, being that Cameron Road Stage 2 are about to undergo a fair amount of design, in that the design of what that shelter would look like to make the corridor feel like one would sit under that, and would just use the Cameron Road Stage 2 shelter on Stage 1 as well.
Bring it out again into Stage 2. Yeah, I give up. I got to know when I'm beaten. Any other questions? I think it would be helpful, actually, Paula, if we could certainly make that report on the that came to us on Monday on the just trying to think of the name of it, but it is basically how do we deal with the major disruptions when the big traffic projects are on. We can send you a copy of that. It was a really good report. I think the staff have done some really good work on and thinking about, what will happen with the rat running, where will it go, and how do we actually try and manage all of that. Thank you.
Chair, just wanted to highlight, there's a report there on the bus stop shelter improvement, but we received an updated report at our executive meeting our council meeting on earlier in the week, and I think we're 89 currently, and we're going to be pretty close to over 100 of the 144 in the near future. So we're making good progress. We'd all love it to be faster, but these things, no one seems to want a bus stop outside their pace. It's always challenging with that, but good progress nevertheless.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to make comment on was that our poor staff that have worked on accessible streets for the last 6 years, because of the new GPS, are having to go back and relook at all of that, obviously, because the funding just won't be there. But the commission have made it clear that we're not abandoning that. It's still our priority to provide that safe cycling and pedestrian walking access as much as we can, but it's going to be dictated to by our funds rather than getting funding through NZTR or through some of the low cost, low risk stuff that we might be able to get some help with. Yep. Anything else? Any questions?
Yeah, I just wonder if we shouldn't get an update of where we actually are with the Arataki and bring in Links Ave as well.
Links Ave is
Well,
underway, yeah.
Yeah, we just, it's all part of the system, and it would be good to have a better understanding of that. I think this is an area where we have all failed in our communication strategy, but let's not concentrate on that side of it. We understand the problem there, but let's try and be positive going forward. How can we get an update?
We can certainly, I think we can certainly get, I wouldn't describe Links Ave as a failure. The community group there have come up with some really good solutions and we're implementing those. So, from a pretty shaky start quite a few years ago, I think as far as the community is concerned, it's ended in a reasonable space. But certainly, can we get an update on where Arataki is? Do we have anyone here? Tom?
I can give a general update, Chair. So it's moving into design phase now, but we've got Craig Dunlop down the back here who knows a bit more detail about it. Sorry for the surprise call up, Craig, but I think you're the right man at the right moment for this one.
He's working to a budget.
Yeah, good morning. So as Tom said, yeah, it's working through a design at the moment and then implementation at local share cost without Waka Kotahi funding. So it's all in order, I believe.
Date of start of work?
Dependent on how the design goes, but it should be relatively quickly. I believe I'll have to come back on an exact date, but it should be this year sometime and then or next financial year. And it was initially going to be undergrounding of services, but given the constraints of that money, we're not doing that anymore. So there's a slight change to that design to enable that. But yeah, it's all underway and it's all on track. So we should be seeing something go up there relatively shortly. So
we are looking to have it contracted in June. That was the task we were given, and that's still what we're working to.
And we're working to a 4.6 million, so that's out of our budget.
That is correct.
Yeah. Streetscape. Well, and that's focused on safety.
Safety again, but raised tables again becoming an issue as well around that. So that, but it is safety as much as we can without undergrounding and the widths of the paths and all that sort of thing. But it's all taken into account safety and then throughput around there and then the links around some of that streetscaping and things like that. So it'll essentially be a massive upgrade from what's already there and completed within budget. So yeah.
Thanks. Anything else? Right. All right. Someone like to move that we receive that report? Paula and Andrew, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. No, that we haven't got that late item. That's us. We've just got minutes in public excluded. Do we need to go into public excluded to approve those, or can we approve them in open? I mean, I know we can. What I'm asking is, do we need to go into public excluded so you can discuss them? Oh, they need to be discussed. Yeah, yes, you need to do that. But do we need to discuss them? Is there any changes? Because if there's not, then we can, in open, we can approve the minutes from the public excluded meeting of the 1st of May.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move that we approve them in public, and if after we've approved them, if anybody thinks, then we just have to go into,
That's right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll move.
So you move, Andrew's moving, Stephen's seconding. Well, there can't be any discussion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
You could ask if there's.
Now,
Do we need to go?
do we need to go into public excluded? Is there anything we want to discuss in public excluded? No. In that case, have you got a closing karakia, Kat?
Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina huie tākie.
Thank you very much. And I declare the meeting closed.